Hey, we are in part 2 of our series, Mean People and What to Do About Them. And I realize that we live in Nebraska. We live in the place, what is it? Be nice? Was that our motto for a while? And everybody in the state of Nebraska is nice. And so I realize you don't have any mean people in your life. And I realize you've never been mean. But just in case this happens, right? Oh, come on, right? I mean, we all have mean people in our life, and I would imagine every single one of us has probably been mean at some point in our life. Whether you have someone at work that you're just like, man alive, what is it with them? Or maybe there's someone, in your extended family. Maybe you're married to someone who don't throw an elbow, or maybe there's someone in your class if you're in school, and it seems like every class has at least one, maybe several that are just kind of mean. And I was telling you about the story of this gal that kind of cut in front of me at the airport last week, and they throw us off, don't they? I mean, in the moment, it's kind of like I didn't see it coming. And since I didn't see it coming, I'm reacting rather than having any time to really think about how I should, maybe respond to this situation. I would respond better had I had a little bit of lead time to think about it. But since I don't have any time to think about it, I'm just going with what's natural. And it's kind of interesting, when you go with what's natural, we end up giving the people that make us mad, as a result, they often gain a sense of control over our lives in that moment. And, this gal that get cut in front of me, I was just kind of like, you know what? Whatever you do, I'm going to do. It's kind of like whatever she did, she had control over what I was going to, my reaction was going to be in that moment. And what came natural to me in that moment was not the golden rule, do unto others what you would want them to do unto us. No, the iron rule was coming to mind, like do unto others as they have done unto you. I mean, I'm going to do unto her what she had done unto me. And oftentimes what happens when we live life this way, when we go through life this way, we kind of on board, we have, if our life is an account, we start making deposits and onboarding this emotion that we're not sure what to do with. And we can't necessarily pay everyone back, even. And so we kind of start carrying this with us. And then we start looking for an offense to be able to offload it to, right? And when you get into, your mid-30s, especially when you get into your 40s, it's so easy because life happens and life is so difficult and so hard, and there's so many things that come along that aren't right. And so by the time you're in your 40s, it's super easy to start living with like this low-grade anger all the time. And then you get into your 50s and 60s and you start living with a mid-grade anger. And if you don't learn how to deal with that low-grade anger in your 40s, that mid-grade anger in your 50s and 60s, you'll become an old, grumpy individual. And then all of a sudden, everything is kind of like, whoo, where in the world does that come from? And so we end up holding on to and nurturing emotion, and since we can't necessarily pay it back to the individual that may have given it to us, we offload it to someone else. Well, I just call that the bully rule. Do unto others as someone else has done unto you. Someone else did that to me, but I'm just kind of holding on to it, and then I'm going to pass it on to the next person. See, being offended, that's inevitable. That's just going to happen. But living offended is a choice. It's a choice that every single one of us is going to make. This is going to happen. But this we choose to keep the embers, the coals of the emotion going. Instead of doing the necessary work to extinguish it, and so it's gone, we keep it alive. And then we look for an offense to be able to offload it on. And in so doing, we end up becoming just like someone we don't even like. Last week, we talked about this narrative, this story in the Old Testament. Samuel was David's biographer. Samuel was a prophet, and so he writes this story about David. And David, before he was King David, was fugitive David. And last week, I kind of wrecked your Sunday school version of David. You know, the Sunday school version of David, and he killed Goliath, and that was great. And he was a man after God's own heart, which he was. And he made a couple of mistakes in his life, but then, kind of rectified those things, which he did. But during this season of David's life, excuse me, it's going to be interesting. During this season of David's life, he was carrying a lot of angst. He was carrying, I would say, a mid to high grade anger. He was confused with God. He was confused as to why he didn't ask to be, anointed king of Israel. He didn't ask to become a national hero. He didn't ask for any of those things. But that's where he found himself. And he didn't do anything wrong to become a fugitive, and now he's being hunted by Saul and the royal army, and he didn't ask for that either. And so he's just he's hurt, he's angry, and during this season of his life, he is carrying a lot of anger with him. So he is, during this season, a violent man, a dangerous man. And so he's kind of looking for a place to offload some of this anger. And, excuse me, maybe that'll do it. All right, so last week we picked up this story with him and this guy Nabal, who was a super rich guy, and David had collected 600 men who were fugitives, who were outlaws, who were angry with King Saul as well, and they were a bunch of rough individuals. And one of the mistakes that we make oftentimes is we take our current value system and we place it over the top of a previous generation's value system, and we can't understand why in the world they would ever do what they do. That's a mistake, because if we lived in their time, in their culture, and saw the world the way that they saw it, it would make perfect sense why they did what they did. And we look at that and go, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So it's a mistake, and sometimes we do this in ancient times, in the things that they did in ancient ways. But in their time, that's the way things were. And so, it was not uncommon for them to steal and pillage and fight, and, violence was just kind of part of the deal. And so, David and his men, they had an opportunity with this rich guy to kind of take advantage of them, but they didn't. And David told his men not to do this, and so they didn't. And in fact, they even protected the shepherds when they were in the hills, tending the sheep. And Nabal, he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. I mean, he had it going on. In ancient times, he was a super rich individual. And so not only did David and his men protect the shepherds and protect the sheep, they protected them from other people who would steal from them as well. And so they kind of provided some security and protection for them. And so Nabal, it became time for them to shear the sheep, and that's kind of their harvest time. It was a time when they would have had extra. And so David sends 10 of his men down to ask, say, hey, would you be willing to share some with us for providing some security and protection for you? And Nabal was a cruel and just a mean individual. Super rough in his business deals, and so he's just kind of like, I don't know who you think you are. I didn't ask for your help. You could just take your deal and get out of here. And so he treats him super poor. And so they leave and tell David what Nabal had said, and talk about a reaction that's just a little bit over the top. That's where we pick it up in 1 Samuel chapter 25. So if you have your paper Bibles, you can open it up to 1 Samuel. If you got it on your phone, you can look at it there as well. 1 Samuel 25, starting in verse 12. So David's young men returned and told him what Nabal had said. And David's reply is, "Get your swords." As he strapped on his own, then 400 men started off with David, and 200 remained behind to guard their equipment. Okay, so here's the offense. Here's David's reaction. And this is exactly what happens with you and I when we have on board, when we've onboarded emotion and we're kind of carrying it and we're keeping this emotion alive from offenses that are in our past, but we continue to grab onto them and we hold on to them and we keep them alive and we keep the embers of those, kind of waiting for an opportunity. Well, here was an opportunity for David to offload some emotion. And here's the thing. He's going to try to justify it. He's going to try to spiritualize it, justify it by spiritualizing it, and talk himself into doing something he should have known he had no business doing. So, getting offended is inevitable, but living offended leads to overblown emotional reactions. Being offended, that's going to happen, but when you live with it and you keep it alive, it will lead to an overblown emotional reaction. Pretty much every single time. Meanwhile, one of Nabal's servants went to Abigail and told her, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master." Now, Abigail, this is Nabal's wife. She is an extraordinary woman. Her reaction to this is mind-blowing. So this guy, he's telling Abigail, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, but he screamed insults at them." In other words, he was mean. "These men have been very good to us, and we've never suffered any harm from them. Nothing was stolen from us the whole time they were with us. In fact, day and night they were like a wall of protection to us and the sheep. You need to know this and figure out what to do, for there's going to be trouble." In other words, we kind of know how David is, and we kind of know how things could go. There's going to be trouble for our master and his whole family. He's so ill-tempered that no one can talk to him. As with many people that would fit into this mean category, there's very little self-awareness. There's very little self-awareness of how they come across, and they're so self-absorbed that they only see through one singular lens, and it's kind of like everyone else around them, they kind of cut their eyes at one another like, does she not see? Nope, I don't think so. It's like, how in the world? There's so little self-awareness. Well, Abigail wasted no time. She quickly gathered 200 loaves of bread, 2 wineskins full of wine, 200 loaves of bread. Is there that many in Walmart? I was wondering about that. I'll have to count next time. Of course, there's definitely not that much toilet paper, I can tell you that. 2 wineskins full of wine, 5 sheep that had been slaughtered, nearly a bushel of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 fig cakes. I'm kind of like, so I wonder what their diet was. So she packed them on donkeys and said to her servants, "Go on ahead, I will follow you shortly." Did you know this is where food trucks got the idea? This was food donkeys. Right here. It's been there for thousands of years. Unbelievable. But she didn't tell her husband Nabal what she was doing. As she was riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, she saw David and his men coming toward her. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed low before him. She fell at his feet and said, and here's the thing. Abigail is about to do something that's it's mind-blowingly brilliant. She's about to address David as if he's already the man she's hoping he will become. Did you catch that? She's going to address him as if he's already the man she's hoping he will become. Ladies, some free advice for you. This works on us even when we know what it is you're doing. Like if you go to your man and you say to him, you know what, honey? You are such an extraordinary planner. Like you are so good at planning. I can't wait to see what you plan for my birthday. It's just going to be amazing. I'm telling you, even when he knows what you're doing, all of a sudden he'll be like, I am? I better start making a plan. This is powerful. I mean, we laugh and it's kind of funny, but I'm telling you what, it's powerful what she does. So she falls at his feet and says, I accept all blame in this matter, my Lord. In other words, a term of respect. Please listen to what I have to say. Because in this moment, I mean, David's pretty much shut off, right? He is perfectly mad. He is the perfect emotion. Like, don't ruin my mood because I am in the zone, and so here's this beautiful woman who's like gonna try and throw me off, and she's like, hey, I want you to listen to what it is I have to say, because when we're in the zone, are we tending to listen? No. So she's like, I need you to listen. I know Nabal is a wicked and ill-tempered man. So she just cuts right to it. And to which David's probably like, you're right. Please don't pay any attention to him. He is a fool, just as his name suggests. But I never even saw the young men you sent. Now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord lives and you yourself live, since the Lord has kept you from murdering and taking vengeance into your own hands, to which David, he did? Yes. In fact, he's using me. Let all your enemies and those who try to harm you be as cursed as Nabal is. You know, as ill-tempered and just crude and mean, and no one likes Nabal. May those, you know what, that take vengeance into their own hands, unlike you're going to do today, may they be as cursed as Nabal. And I don't want you to be cursed as Nabal, David, do you? I'm telling you, she's brilliant. And here is a present that I, your servant, have brought to you and your young men. Please forgive me if I have offended you in any way. The Lord will surely reward you with a lasting dynasty. David, yes, we know. We know that you've been, crowned the next king of Israel. We know that. You're not gonna do something to blemish that, will you? The Lord will surely reward you with a lasting dynasty, for you are fighting the Lord's battles. I am? Yes, you are. And you have not done wrong throughout your entire life. Okay, that might be a stretch. Even when you are chased by those who seek to kill you. Yes, David, we know. We know Saul's out to kill you, and we know that you're innocent of that. You do? Yeah, we know. Your life is safe in the care of the Lord your God. I love this. Secure in his treasure pouch. In other words, the Hebrew is, David, why are you taking stuff into your own hands? instead of trusting God. You are perfectly safe in God's wallet. Don't you think He can protect you? But the lives of your enemies will disappear like stones shot from a sling. Did you catch it? David, you remember Goliath, don't you? And see, in that moment, were you trusting in your skill and in yourself and you thought you were something at that point? See, you were just a little shepherd boy, David, and you weren't trusting in yourself. You were scared out of your mind. Did you have some skill? Yes, you had some skill, but at the end of the day, you were trusting God in that moment in which no one else would, and you trusted Him to a degree that no one else was trusting Him, and God was the one who was your deliverer that day, and He will continue to deliver you if you will trust Him. What she's asking him is, David, what story do you want to tell when this is nothing more than just a story? You tell. See, when the Lord has done all He promised and has made you leader of Israel, don't let this be a blemish on your record. This isn't a story you're going to want to tell. Then your conscience won't have to bear the staggering burden of needless bloodshed and vengeance. And when the Lord has done these things for you, not you doing them for you, please remember me, your servant. And I'm tempted to close the narrative right here, but there is kind of a fairy tale ending, so I've got to share it with you. David replied to Abigail, "Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you to meet me today. Thank God for your good sense." Yes. And don't we all at times need someone to come and talk to us that has sense when we are out of our good sense? "Bless you for keeping me from murder and from carrying out vengeance with my own hands. For I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, who has kept me from hurting you, that if you had not hurried out to meet me, not one of Nabal's men would still be alive tomorrow morning." Then David accepted her present and told her, "Return home in peace. I have heard what you said. We will not kill your husband." Now, I don't know if Abigail was conflicted about that. Just kidding. But when Abigail arrived home, she found that Nabal was throwing a big party and was celebrating like a king, and he was very drunk. So she didn't tell him anything about her meeting with David until dawn the next day. In the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him what had happened. And as a result, he had a stroke. You should read your Bibles. It's amazing stuff. And he laid paralyzed on his bed like a stone. About 10 days later, because they had no idea what to do with a stroke, the Lord struck him and he died. Then David sent messengers to Abigail to ask her to become his wife. She said yes, and they lived happily ever after. The end. So, here's what we have. We have Nabal, who did evil for good. We have David, who was going to be more than willing to do evil for evil. And we have Abigail, who did good for evil. What Nabal did was maniacal. It's kind of a maniac. David, isn't this where we live most times? It's predictable. In fact, we would justify it and say, yeah, that's what we should do. But what Abigail did was remarkable. And as we kind of close our time, I wanted to share a couple of stories with you from my life, because as your lead pastor, I would love it if I could tell you that I live in this world right here all the time, but I don't. I'm just the same as the rest of all of you. I'm just able to put one word in front of the other, and so I get to have a microphone strapped to my head. And and sometimes I'm here, but I want to be here, maybe even more than I am. So many years ago now, and I have told you, I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly of church. This was one of the uglies. My wife and I were in conflict with another couple in this church, and it just it didn't resolve. And I wouldn't say that we were totally in the right, but we were certainly not what they were characterizing us as. And so it was a hard situation, but it escalated to a point where the leaders in the church had gotten involved, and so it was just kind of this. It just got really messy and really ugly, to the point where we had no idea that this had happened until someone had contacted us and said, did you realize that they sent a packet of information about you and your entire family and some of your brothers and even your mom and your dad? And they sent it to every single person in the church. And they mischaracterized you, they mischaracterized your brothers, and they mischaracterized your mom and dad. Now, I would have been fine had it been something just about me. That would have been fine, because the dispute was between us. But they wanted to destroy our entire family. And any of you that knows my mom and dad, my mom and dad, and I realize I'm a little biased, but I think I could make an argument. They are better than any character in this book besides Jesus. If the Bible was being written, I think you would find Harry and Shirley in there. So for them to mischaracterize them, anger didn't quite cut it. And there was a group of people that believed everything that was in this packet, and there was a whole bunch of people that fortunately had enough sense to go, I don't think that was right. But what do you do? Because you live in small town America, right? And you're going down the grocery aisle, and you look down there and you're like, oh, no, that's them. I need to go down that aisle, but I think I'll just mess around and act like I need something over here until that aisle opens up, right? But see, fortunately, in that time, I was just kind of on the front end of really learning what to do with anger and how to deal with it, and what forgiveness actually is and how to actually engage with that. And so through the process of doing that, Jen and I had already forgiven, and we were free. We were free. In fact, this couple and those that were kind of associated with them, every time we would see them, we'd go down the aisle and we would stop and say hi. In fact, one time Jen stopped to say hi to this gal. She had the freezer door open, and Jen was like, it was so funny. I went up and I was going to say hi to her, and she stepped into the freezer to avoid me. Like, what are you doing in the freezer? So it was just, we were good. But we were good only because of the principles that we learned from Jesus. And so returning good for evil was just, we're gonna not avoid you. We're not going to, pay evil for evil. We're gonna treat you well, even if you haven't treated us well. And sometimes that was hard, But as the years have gone by, now it's not hard at all. That one, I would say, was remarkable. Now, the other one is not remarkable. It was very predictable. In fact, it still is. But a couple of years ago, there was a guy that I wanted to, I really, really, really wanted to do something, but I needed this person to sign off on it and allow me to be able to participate with them. And so I made a request, and I intended, I expected this person to come and talk to me individually and give me an answer, yes or no. And if the answer was no, then I would have wanted a conversation as to the why behind why it is there was a no. But instead of coming and talking to me, which I found very cowardice, they ended up talking to a different individual and coming, around the horn and then just texting me to say, no, they're not going to let you do this. And it just made me really angry. And I didn't, and so my response to them was to ignore them, and every single time, and normally with this individual, we'd have had a conversation. In fact, we would have even bantered back and forth. And instead, I was angry with them, and so those conversations were short. Why? Because I was going to make him pay. And so, he was trying to have a conversation, and instead, it was, I'm not talking to you. And so this was a couple years ago. I still have not gone and talked to him. And enough time has passed now, I look at myself in the mirror and say, Eric, you're such a fool. It's so not worth doing that. Why don't you just go and talk to him and tell him, you know what? This made me mad, and this is why. And then get over it and move forward. But see, I'm still carrying that offense with me. And I would imagine it's leaked out onto some others at some points in my life over the last couple of years. So what about you? What about you? Are you predictable? Crossing individually and as a whole, I would love it if we would begin and we would have a reputation in this town being this remarkable. Next week, we're going to see what Jesus has to say about all of this as well. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, love you, thankful for you, and thankful for your grace and your mercy. Thank you for working in every single one of our lives, me included. And I just pray, God, that you would teach us how to live like Jesus. And I realize it's not easy, and we live in a time when, people do and say things that are just, they're just so mean, and they're just so rude. So God, would you teach us what it looks like? That we could be remarkable, that we could be extraordinary instead of predictable. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.